Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rowan Petts, Executive Director here at the Australian Chamber of Commerce in South Korea. Today, I'm presenting part one of a three-part webinar series, Post-COVID Transformation and Medtech Opportunities in Northeast Asia. We have three very special guests from Intralink presenting today. Our first presenter is talking about Japan. It is Charles Cielo, who is the Project Director at Intralink Japan. If you'd like to watch the other two presentations, I welcome you to visit www.austchamkorea.org. Thank you very much.
Everyone, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be watching this from. I hope everyone is having a great day, and thank you for gathering. Today, I will be speaking about digital health and robotics related opportunities in Japan, and I will also be giving you some tips on how to manage market entry. The talk will follow the structure outlined in the agenda, although we will be having our Q&A session at the end of the multi-regional talk. So without further ado, let me start the talk with a self-introduction. So my name is Charles Cielo, and I'm a project director who oversees Intralink life science and medtech projects in Japan. My background is in biotech and pharma, and at Intralink I specialize in helping companies validate and enter the Japanese market. And Intralink is an international BD consultancy with a deep specialism in East Asia. Based in the UK, but with personnel all over the world, we make commercial success in East Asian markets fast, easy, and cost-effective. We work in multiple industries, of which, as I mentioned earlier, I take care of our healthcare and health-related businesses in Japan. To begin with, let me pose the question, why should you be interested in Japan? Well, the simple answer to that is that Japan is a very large and sophisticated market, as you probably already know. It's the third largest medical market in the world, with multi-billion-dollar pharma, medical device, and IVD markets. It's also home to a huge research market. We also have a large patient base that is only expected to grow with aging of the population. For these reasons, practically all major global players have a presence in Japan, competing with domestic companies for market share. Aspiring market entrants can look to Japan's social needs to map out opportunities. Japan most urgently needs solutions for its aging population. Japan's population is projected to shrink from 106 million to 88 million by 2065, with a proportion of the 75-plus age group projected to rise from 14% to up to a quarter of the diminished population by 2065. Now, this age group is important because it is the most resource-intensive group to support both medically and non-medically. For example, the cost of non-medical community care services grows exponentially from age 75 and onwards. Financially, we have somewhat adapted to the increasing cost of community care by increasing public caregiving insurance premiums. And beyond this, the government is increasingly looking to allocate more of sales tax revenue directly to medical and community care. Community care costs are highlighted because dementia prevalence also increases with age. And this subgroup is most likely to need non-medical care, like feeding and bathing assistance. The Japanese Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare projects that Japan will have over 6.75 million dementia patients by 2025, and this will increase to 8.5 million by 2060. Now, naturally, Japan is already preparing for the crisis. The Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare has enacted some initiatives that may represent opportunities for prospective market entrants. So the MHLW, as we affectionately call it, defined 8 critical services that it wanted to have in place by Japan fiscal year 2020. And these will gradually evolve into more ambitious health initiatives from 2021 and beyond. These include cancer, AI, and data handling goals that are designed to make the current system more effective and aligned with the needs of the times. Products that are aligned with these initiatives are more likely to gain both clinician and public support. And I'll be introducing you to some of the products that have made it to the market as a reference for what products Japan needs now and will likely need in the near future. Please note that these products require nuanced approaches for market entry. Some markets are too immature and are still waiting for a feasible business monetization models to materialize. And ideally, the best products for market entry are those that could be seamlessly slotted into existing workflows with public health or community care insurance coverage. Now, the most high-profile initiative of recent years is precision oncology. We inaugurated public health insurance covered precision oncology testing late last year, and adoption is increasing at a stable pace. The system is managed by 12 core and 33 hub or subcore hospitals that run molecular tumor boards and participate in clinical trials, while supporting cancer genomics initiatives of 122 liaison hospitals that are networked under the core and subcore hospitals. Now, the entire system is centered on CCAT, or the National Cancer Center for Cancer Genomics and Advanced Therapeutics. It's a government agency under the MHLW that is both a national repository of cancer clinical data and a vehicle for leveraging this data to increase therapeutic options for Japanese resident patients via the application of big data and AI. If you want to bring in a solution for precision oncology, be advised that you will not be able to ignore CCAT. Beyond cancer genomics, we are also aggressively looking at other applications of AI to clinical workflows, be it in pathology and diagnosis, or more mundanely, hospital operations. Now, DTX is still nascent in Japan, but we approved our first DTX solution, Cure App, a smoking cessation app, this June. And Cure App will be closely followed by an insomnia solution, SysMed, which should get approval sometime this year, or maybe early next year. Aspiring market entrants should pay attention to these pioneering DTX solutions because they set precedents for regulatory approval, insurance coverage, and specifically for patient-facing apps, localization of messaging that is targeted to end users. Now, Japan is somewhat behind in terms of healthcare ICT, but many small networks are emerging to leverage ICT to improve the quality of life of residents, particularly the elderly. But healthcare service providers need to follow industry guidelines that are designed for compliance with government guidelines. The overall system is designed to increase consumer trust and usage by increasing choice and quality of service. While the sector is large, it is designed to be very competitive from the start. Further, Japan has strict data privacy laws, and it applies double to clinical data because these are defined to be sensitive by law. B2C models for non-medical solutions where products are not covered by public health insurance are possible, albeit at the cost of limitations to marketing claims and pricing, especially for apps, because there are a lot of free apps that are available on both Google and Apple platforms. As an example, we have here the new dementia prevention solution that is sold to individuals and corporations that combines a preventive social program with the world's smallest brain activity measurement device. Now, the Asken app follows a freemium B2C model and is one of the most successful health apps in the nation. It's primarily a calorie counter and a diet advisor app, but 4.5 million of us users are using the app daily to keep track of our daily nutritional intake. The MicroNet in Kyoto is a solution to enable clinicians to access patient lifelog and real-world data, and it is a model for hospital industry collaboration. While it's also possible to access the market via partnership with a private life insurance company, which are also entering the space. Now, taking care of the elderly cannot be done purely via software-based solutions. The elderly need physical help, so we are also developing physical solutions to fill in the gap. In 2013, the Japanese government developed a 5-year plan for developing nursing care robots as part of our vision for what we call Society of 5.0. Now, this involves making solutions that are physical in nature, like transfer aids, mobility aids, toileting aids, bathing aids, and some that have more of an ICT component, like care services support. And some of these products have already borne fruit and delivered real products to the market. Here are examples of wearable and non-wearable transfer aids. And Kukichi was the first to reach the market with a B2C solution. So it makes a pneumatic muscle suit that is the first exoskeleton that you can buy from a brick and mortar consumer electronics store. I personally got one from my in-laws, and I can say that the 20 kilogram plus load reduction capability does make a difference in ameliorating the effort involved in caregiving. Similarly, Cyberdyne has been making waves for some time now with its powered exoskeletons, which can be used for industrial applications, for community care, and as well as physical therapy. But I believe it mostly follows a B2B model. RAA, robot assisted activity solutions, have also hit the market in droves, targeting elderly family members who are living by themselves. And these take many forms. But arguably, I mean, what I personally consider the most sophisticated, best documented, and cutest solution is the Sony Aibo, which was the subject of a small but positive study in 2013. Not all RAAs are smart solutions, but AI is increasingly a standard feature. The developers of the Aibo certainly understood dogs. And playing with the unit I got last year, I can see that where it can support the psyches of isolated elderly with its ultra-realistic interactivity and ability to learn. As a bonus for caregivers, it can also be used by family members as a remote camera that and keep track of their elderly family members via programmable AI-enabled face tracking, watchdog functionality. Now, Japan is a rational system, and entering the market is not a Herculean task. However, there are challenges that need to be understood and addressed. First and most important for medical solutions is that Japan is home to one of the largest and most sophisticated public healthcare systems in the world. The only public system, in fact, that supports top three largest IVD, pharma, and medical markets, medical device markets, while ensuring universal coverage, high quality provision of services, and world-class clinical outcomes for a population of 127 million. The practice of medicine is considered social infrastructure in Japan, and it is a unique system where you have a single payer public insurance system that represents the ultimate revenue source for virtually all therapeutics and diagnostics expenditure, and the end user facing pricing for medical products is uniform nationally, but the delivery of these services is mostly private and laissez-faire. And we can say it is a very successful system, and actually that is part of the problem. We residents enjoy affordable universal coverage that is age agnostic, with a cap on medical overall medical spending. And specialist care is easily accessible in any of the 8,000 plus hospitals and 100,000 plus clinics all throughout the nation. And this is particularly so because we don't have GP or a restrictive gateway system. Um, as a result, average life and healthy life expectancy is on the rise, as you can see in the figures. And you can say that the system has been too successful because now we need to find a way to take care of the increasing number of people who are living well beyond their 70s. It is no joke that we're already preparing for a world where one needs to plan to live up to 100. And we also have unique business practices that need to be considered when making a go-to-market strategy. Probably the one that most that that most people stumble upon is the fact that many Japanese companies tend to work through dealers and distributors, even though these add, let's say, price levels and cost levels to a transaction. Now, Japan maintains its own standards and practices. So FDA or EC certification is only useful as reference, but the PMDA will make its own decisions. For submissions to get approval, you will need a market authorization holder or an MAH. And as you can see here, the MAH is ultimately the entity that is responsible for ensuring that the medical device meets Japanese quality and safety standards. And it is very critical to successful market entry in Japan. Now, there is the MH is effectively the right to sell a product in Japan, a medical product in Japan. Um, and usually a distributor owns that. But recently we have also allowed, let's say, a version of the MH program where the manufacturer owns the right and only designates it to a distributor or a local entity. We call that the DEMA. And you will also need certifications as part of the submission process, but this should be no surprise. You need the foreign market accreditation, the QMS, and of course you will need to meet Japanese industrial standards. And for these certifications, you will need to engage different and multiple agencies. So for example, the MAH, the license for that can only be gotten from local governments, but you make your submissions to the PMDA. Sometimes, depending on the class of your product, you only need, let's say, to work with certification bodies instead of doing a full review by the PMDA. And for medical devices in particular, we have a classing system that is based on risk to patients in the event of device failure. And this is, and I'm showing you here, is the standard process for application and approval. So an applicant makes their application to the PMDA, who then does the review, and they may do an inspection depending on the class of your product. They may do a site inspection, and then when they grant approval, there might be a follow-up inspection post-market. Now, I'd like to give you some tips relevant to entering the Japanese market. First and foremost is don't assume that marketing strategies that work overseas will work in Japan. And this applies also to messaging targeted to KOLs and customers. You need to confirm the match of needs and clinical consensus with the product service claims of efficacy or benefit. You need to know what the standards of care are and expect that it will take time to replace them if at all possible. You need to know that you need to know what your competitors are doing in Japan and make sure that you're clearly differentiated from them. You need to determine your ultimate revenue source because this is a key part of your strategy. And of course, I mean, if you're handling data as a medical device and ICT solution, you need to make sure that you are compliant with Japanese guidelines for data handling, which is somewhere between, and Japanese privacy restrictions are somewhere between GDPR and the US. So it's not quite as strict as GDPR, but not quite as loose as HIPAA, for example, in the States. So, and you also know, like if you're selling something to hospitals, I mean, you should know that if it's not directly related to clinical outcomes, clinical benefit, hospitals in general are in the red. So your customers will always be cost sensitive. And for this reason, I mean, you should know like how your product or similar product classes are currently being sold in Japan. And while we do have expedited approval, it is for certain products only. And approval does not mean market access because the public insurance really is what you need to access the bulk of your market. So overall, you should plan your market entry, sales, and registration strategies together. Now, I'll give you a couple of case studies of companies that we have helped in Japan. So case study one is a UK-based a device maker with a strong track record in the EU and the US. And it asked us to help it understand the Japanese market. So we did a market study, understood the competition and regulatory requirements. We built up a KOL and distributor candidate networks, and effectively built up a supply chain from scratch. But it came to light that one of the materials used in the device could not be imported in Japan because it did not comply with Japanese industrial standards. And basically this prompted the manufacturer to put everything on hold for several years. Now, case study two is another UK-based company, this time an IVD maker. The product is a golden standard IVD that is used for a particular indication. It's already being sold in Japan and reimbursed. But it asked us, to help us understand why it wasn't making as much money as it was in its number one market, the US. Similar to the first case, we did a market study, determined standards of care, best practices, and competitors. And ultimately, we found out why revenues weren't quite as high as expected. This was related to how the test was used in Japan. And we also built relationships with KOLs. We added a PI to a clinical study. And we also helped capture an account from a big brand competitor and help the client develop a strategy for defending its dominant market position in the nation. So last but not the least, I'll give you a bit of an update on COVID. As you can see here, it's not quite as peachy as it was, a few months ago. Right now, we still think we are somewhat still in control of the pandemic. And despite a recent flare-up, in-person trade shows and meetings are still possible, although rare. So our national caseload, total infections is like 172,000, with severe critical cases in the 500s, with mortalities in actually recently, as of today, it's like 2,600. Recoveries, most people recover, but right now, because of a recent flare-up, a lot of people are still in the hospital recovering. So the graphs you see, it's the kind of old. So it's missing a peak that we are experiencing in July and in November, December, and it's that peak that is mostly linked with a government program for promoting in-country domestic travel and eating out that has been shown to actually double the risk of contracting the disease. Our approach to COVID has always been no lockdowns because the Japanese government cannot legally do it. But and there are no restrictions to movement in country from the very start. But we do have good voluntary compliance to social distancing, masks and whatnot, and proactive. So the government is doing a lot of proactive contact tracing, contact tracing, not contract tracing, and cluster mapping. We have restricted some entry from overseas with mandatory 14-day quarantine and pre-testing. Our treatment options, which I believe is kind of unique to Japan, is listed as below. This is what is recommended by our National Institute of Infectious Disease. They involve, obviously, you have remdesivir, which is no longer WHO recommended. Dexamethasone is a steroid. We have favipiravir, which is a viral inhibitor that was developed in Japan. Cyclosinide is also a viral inhibitor and a glucocorticoid, which is also developed in Japan. Actemra is an IL-6 inhibitor that was found in Osaka University, and then licensed in by Roche. And Futan, the nafamostat, is a serine protease that was developed by, funnily enough, the pharma arm of Japan Tobacco. So that is all for now. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to cover them at the end of this session. Thank you very much.